Today, I'm restoring a Soviet-era alarm watch I picked up on eBay. This watch, which was designed by Poljot, was affectionately called the Cricket by those living in the USSR, presumably after the Vulcan cricket from the 40s. The plating shows signs of wear in multiple areas, with once sharp edges and corners now rounded, and various gouges are present throughout. So I plan to restore the case to the best of my ability. There are two crowns. The top one winds the spring for the alarm, and the lower one winds the mainspring for the movement. This one happens to be wound tight. The alarm would sound when the hour hand meets the alarm hand. Okay, well that's a good sign. Although when I hear that, I don't think of a cricket. It sounds more like a bee caught behind a window. But I guess bee caught behind window isn't as catchy of a nickname. Of course, it isn't running, but what fun would that be if it was? Alright, let's dive in. Hey, that looks awfully familiar. The caliber 2612.1 is not an original design. In fact, it's a derivative of the AS1475. The first step of working on any movement is to let down the power of the main spring. I'm not saying I don't have bad habits of my own, but there are some videos out there showing the pallet fork getting yanked out under full load. Doing that is just asking for trouble. You could destroy a pallet stone, and the high rate of speed the train moves to exhaust the power in their dirty bearings certainly causes unnecessary wear, and this is totally avoidable. The main stem should be removed by depressing the setting lever post, but it's very difficult to move. I needed to use something a little stronger like the tips of these tweezers to even get it to budge. That looks gross. The alarm stem was not as difficult to remove. With the movement removed from the case, I can carefully remove the hands with these small levers while using a small piece of plastic to protect the dial. The movement ring can be uninstalled by removing two screws. This ring sort of serves as a spacer so the movement sits properly within the case. This is the hammer that buzzes against the small post that protrudes from the case back to sound the alarm. Two foot screws are loosened so that the dial can be removed. Check out that water damage. This rust was the reason it was a bit tricky for me to remove that main stem. Hopefully I can remediate this without needing to replace any parts. The unlocking wheel holder is uninstalled, and then the unlocking wheel can be lifted off the hour wheel. I'll explain how this all works when it's reassembled. The minute wheel and cannon pinion are removed. This is the alarm disconnection lever, which lifts up toward the dial when the alarm is commanded to sound. There are two keyless works, one for the conventional movement and the other which allows the setting of the alarm in one direction. I'll take a break from this side for now and return to the train side of the movement to proceed with disassembly, starting with the removal of the balance. I was recently contacted by Link Micro, and they were kind enough to send me the 10-inch version of their digital microscope. I've been quite happy with the 7-inch, and perhaps I'll find a way to mount it to my lathe setup. I don't work under them, but these microscopes are excellent for part inspection, and all the really close shots in my videos are actually recorded directly on the microscope itself. The balance pivots look fine, though they're a bit gummed up. The pallet cock and pallet fork are removed. Looks good here, but it's in serious need of a cleaning. After removing these 3 screws, the train wheel bridge can simply be lifted away. The sweep second wheel in the center is actually the 4th wheel, which is lifted out of the hollow arbor of the second wheel. The 3rd wheel is then also removed. The escape wheel is carefully slid out and set aside for cleaning. The center wheel is secured under this secondary train bridge, but is also blocked by the ratchet wheel. Notice the 3 lines on the crown wheel screw. This means that the screw is reverse threaded. The crown wheel ring is also removed from its post. I'm now uninstalling the click and the click spring. Who knows what kind of gunk and debris made its way under there after all these years. The barrel bridge is now uninstalled, followed by the mainspring barrel. The winding pinion and sliding clutch are fused together thanks to the rust. That about does it for the conventional movement train. Onto the alarm side, I begin by removing the ratchet wheel from the alarm spring barrel arbor. It has its own click and click spring, which is also removed. The alarm barrel bridge is uninstalled. The coarse-toothed transfer wheel here is driven by the barrel, which in turn drives the hammer on the right. The winding pinion for the alarm is removed along with the hammer. Back to the dial side, I begin by uninstalling the lid for the alarm bolt. The spring and the alarm bolt are both removed. The keyless work allows the alarm to be set in one direction. Its various components are removed so they can be cleaned prior to reassembly. Despite having quite a bit of debris, this area did not suffer from the same kind of water damage as the other one. I'm now removing the setting lever spring for the main keyless work. The intermediate setting gear is uninstalled. The yoke spring and yoke are lifted out. The maintaining spring for the setting lever is removed, and I'll go ahead and push both of them out from the other side. Yeah, quite a bit of corrosion here. This is the mainspring barrel for the conventional movement. Its white alloy mainspring is in good shape, so I plan to reuse it. And here is the spring barrel for the alarm mechanism. Looks like they used a carbon steel spring in this one. It looks fine to me, so I'll reuse it since this will be my watch and the spring itself only controls the alarm and doesn't play any role in timekeeping. I'm pre-cleaning the movement using a soft brush and some naphtha. When complete, I carefully inspect the jewels under the microscope for any damage before proceeding. Now I'll use a sharpened tip of pegwood to scrub the insides of each of the bearings, such as the train jewels. Considering how filthy this movement is, I will remove the whole jewel setting and end stone for both sides of the balance for ease of cleaning. So it's gonna be like that, huh? I guess these don't just hinge up nicely like the Inca blocks do. The upper balance jewels are removed as well. Yuck. The parts most affected by rust are soaked in Evaporest. From there, I can reassess the situation to determine whether anything needs to be replaced.
The next morning.
You know what? These don't look too bad now. Sure, there remains some pitting on the surface, but these are still functional. The upper shock protected jewels are reinstalled into the balance cock. I use the automatic oiler to lubricate the jewel with Mobius 9010. The same process is repeated for the lower jewels. The stud carrier and regulator arm were removed with the balance cock for cleaning, and so now I'll reinstall both of them before the balance is fitted back with it. The hairspring stud is reinserted into the slot of the carrier, and the small set screw is tightened down to secure it in place. The hairspring is fed behind the pin of the regulator arm before the guard is twisted shut. I'm now test fitting the balance to ensure freedom of movement, first by aligning the shim that fits below the foot. With a puff of air, I can see the balance is oscillating normally. I can also recheck it in several positions. Since this balance uses a movable stud carrier, it is far more convenient to dial in the beat error than on balances with fixed stud carriers, where your only option is to resituate the hairspring collet on the staff itself. The regulator arm is still independently adjustable. As mentioned in a previous video, I modified this mainspring winder set I got from AliExpress to allow me to use any winder in any of the provided holders, making them a bit more universal. The tail of the mainspring has a T-hook that needs to land within the cutout slot of the barrel. The spring is wound into the holder, and then I lubricate the bottom of the barrel with a little bit of Mobius HP 1300. This is the slot in the mainspring barrel where the tail needs to hook into. It's not the easiest, but with a little luck it will find the slot. HB 1300 lubricates the spring in the hole where the barrel arbor will rotate. The barrel lid is now snapped back on. Now I get to enjoy repeating the same process for the alarm barrel. As alluded to earlier, the 2612.1 is not just a copy of the Adolf Schild 1475, but even an improvement upon it. For example, the lower bearing for the alarm hammer is jeweled instead of metal on this movement. On the AS 1475, the alarm is active only when the crown is pulled out. The keyless work for the alarm was altered in this design so that the alarm is activated when the crown is pushed in. This improvement alleviated the owner of any worry that they might accidentally disengage the alarm by pushing it back in. HB 1300 lubricates the hole where the setting lever stud will be fitted. On the AS 1475, this would actually screw into the setting lever. Mobius 9504 grease is used on the post where the setting lever will fit, and a bit more is placed on top of the lever where the maintaining spring will depress against it. As you can see, 9504 is generally used on the harder metal-to-metal sliding surfaces, while HB 1300 is used on rotational metal-to-metal surfaces, like where the yoke fits onto its post. The yoke spring is now installed. The intermediate setting gear is lowered into place. Finally, the setting lever spring is fitted after greasing the mode selection pin of the setting lever. A similar procedure is used on the keyless work for the alarm. These setting levers differ from the AS movement from which this one is copied, in that they are pressed down from the other side in order to release the stem, whereas on the AS movements, the setting lever screw is loosened to achieve the same result. The spring for the alarm setting connection wheel is reinstalled under its screw. HB 1300 lubricates the alarm crown wheel post before it's lowered into place. The alarm setting and winding rocker is slid into position. The alarm setting lever spring can now be reinstalled. The rocker spring is now fitted onto the plate. The alarm bolt is lowered into place, followed by its respective spring, and then the bolt lid. The alarm mainspring barrel has a lower ratchet wheel that interfaces with the crown wheel on the dial side of the movement. There's also an upper ratchet wheel whose sole purpose is to interface with the click. The lower pivot of the alarm hammer receives a small amount of HB 1300 before being installed into its jewel. The coarse-toothed alarm transfer wheel is installed next to it. The alarm winding pinion can now be reinstalled before then lowering the alarm bridge onto the plate. It can be tightened down after ensuring the pivots are properly seated. I'm now reinstalling the click spring and the click. The alarm upper ratchet wheel is now fitted to the alarm barrel arbor. The upper pivots of the alarm train are lubricated with HB 1300. Onto the main conventional train, the winding pinion and sliding clutch receive Mobius 9504 grease. The stem is also greased prior to being inserted into the movement. Depressing the setting lever stud allows me to slide the stem into the plate. Releasing the stud causes the lever to return and secure the stem around its detent. HB 1300 lubricates the hole in the plate where the barrel arbor needs to rotate. The mainspring barrel is then lowered into place. The barrel bridge can now be reinstalled after lightly lubricating the top part of the barrel arbor and also the setting lever stud. The click spring and click are now fitted to the bridge. I'm now placing the crown wheel ring over the post and using HB 1300 before fitting the crown wheel. Remember, the crown wheel screw is reverse threaded. HB 1300 lubricates the center hole where the second wheel is lowered into. With the center wheel in place, the ratchet wheel can now be installed. The center wheel cock is now installed. Again, HB 1300 is used on these pivots due to their larger size relative to the rest of the train. Both the escape wheel and pallet jewels are treated with epilam. Since epilam is quite volatile, it's important to dry the parts above room temperature to avoid condensation forming on the metal as it evaporates. Only the stones need to receive this treatment. Later, after the movement has run in for a bit, a small amount of oil will lubricate where the faces of the pallet stones meet with the escape wheel teeth. Epilon helps to prevent this oil from migrating away from those surfaces, thereby extending the service interval of the movement. The escape wheel is now positioned onto the plate. The third wheel is lowered, and then the extended arbor of the fourth wheel receives a touch of Mobius 9010 before it is inserted into the hollow arbor of the second wheel. The train wheel bridge is now installed, carefully ensuring each pivot is seated before tightening it down. It's important to check the snappy movement of the train. It shouldn't in any way bind up or appear sluggish when starting and stopping. Each train wheel pivot receives a droplet of Mobius 9010 oil for lubrication. The pallet fork is now installed and secured by the pallet cock. After a couple winds, I now ensure it can cycle through every tooth in the escape wheel. Doing so helps detect any damaged teeth. I may not film it for every video, but it's really important to incrementally check each of the subsystems are working correctly as I build the movement. The further along I get, the more complex it will be to troubleshoot any issues caused by upstream areas. That being said, despite the confidence I've built up to this point in the assembly, I'm still absolutely elated and relieved when I see that balance spring to life. After about 15 minutes of allowing the epilam to rub off on the faces of the stones, I remove the pallet fork so I can oil the stones with Mobius 941. I then allow the movement to run for a day or so to allow the oils to settle in. For a 40-something-year-old Swiss copy, the movement is keeping excellent time and performing well overall. A little bit of 9504 grease is added to the alarm stem before it is then reinserted into the movement. HP 1300 oil is used to lightly lubricate the tips of the alarm wheel, which need to smoothly oscillate the hammer. Back to the dial side of the movement, I can proceed with finishing up the alarm mechanism, and I'll demonstrate how this all works. The alarm disconnect lever is now reinstalled. The intermediate setting gear for the alarm mechanism is lowered into place. The cannon pinion is fitted over the center wheel arbor. The minute wheel is lowered onto its post, followed by the hour wheel, which sort of presses on the disconnect lever. Take note of the 3 little tabs protruding on top of the wheel. The hour wheel presses on the lever. When pressed, the lever inhibits the motion of the alarm hammer, shown here. So, when the alarm needs to sound, the lever needs to be allowed to spring up and disconnect from the hammer. The unlocking wheel fits over the hour wheel. Take note of the 3 holes along its surface. Over it is the unlocking wheel holder. A bit of 9504 grease was applied to the underside of the tabs that ride against the wheel. First, I'm testing to ensure normal time setting mode still functions freely. Next, I'll add a little bit of wind to the alarm mainspring. The amount of wind, of course, dictates how long the alarm will sound for. If I don't want the alarm to sound again, I simply don't rewind the alarm. Now I'm just setting the time gradually until it meets the alarm trigger point. Just imagine the hour and minute hands rotating around until the hour hand meets the alarm hand. Let's see that again. The 3 cutouts in the unlocking wheel correspond to the 3 tabs in the hour wheel once every 12 hours. When they align, the hour wheel lifts up and allows the disconnect lever to release the hammer. Hope that makes sense. A little before and after comparison with the freshly serviced movement. The dial and movement ring are now reinstalled. Like a calendar complication, it's important that all the hands of the time and the alarm are coordinated properly. So I'll trigger the alarm again so I have a clean reference point. Let's call that 12 o'clock. After setting the hand, I once again rotate it around until I can hear the activation. It doesn't buzz because I didn't put any extra wind in it. With the hour and minute hands installed, I can double check the coordination to ensure the alarm will sound at the precise moment the hour hand reaches the alarm hand. Finally, the sweep seconds hand is installed. At this point, I can breathe easy knowing the movement is in good shape, so I'll now give the case some love. The plating will be redone, but before I do that, I need to refinish the surface to exactly how I want it. Doing so will bring it back down to the base metal. The crystal I'll get to later, but all it needs is some polywatch and a little elbow grease. When it comes to casework, I don't have the fanciest tools, and this is somewhat of a developing skill of mine. So thanks to the magic of editing, you don't need to witness the hours I spent methodically sanding and reshaping each surface and angle without the help of a proper lapping machine. Boy, I could have really used one of those. After sanding enough to sharpen the edges, I then need to restore the brushed surfaces as close to the original as I can. The other surfaces are polished using a firm wheel to avoid rounding the newly sharpened edges. Back down to the base metal, and I'm pretty happy with the finish. Now I need to clean and degrease the case in preparation for the replating. I won't get into the step-by-step here as there are plenty of great videos describing the process, but the most important thing to remember is the case has to be 100% clean of all greases and oils, or the plating will turn out like crap. Here's what I started with. And the end result. Sure, it isn't perfect, but it's better than my last attempt at refinishing a case. And when it comes to progression, whether it's at work or at a hobby like this, it feels good to see forward progress. Poljot, a renowned Russian watchmaking brand, has a rich history dating back to its founding as the first Moscow watch factory in 1930 under orders from Joseph Stalin. The fledgling company got its start using machinery and parts from the United States. About 24 former Duberhampton technicians came over to train workers to get it off the ground. The first movements produced still had the stamp of Duberhampton, Canton, Ohio, USA. The name Poljot translates to flight in Russian, reflecting its initial focus on producing timepieces for the aviation industry. During World War II, the factory supplied watches for the Soviet military, solidifying its reputation for precision and reliability. In the post-war era, the company expanded its production to include a wide range of mechanical watches for both civilian and military use. Notably, in 1961, Yuri Gagarin wore a Sturmansky during his historic spaceflight, elevating the brand's status as the first watch in space. The Soviet Union's dissolution in the early 90s led to significant changes for Poljot. The brand continued to produce watches, but the economic challenges of the transition impacted its operations. Despite this, Poljot continued on until its bankruptcy in 2004. I want to give a shout out to a viewer named Jake who follows this channel and shares a passion for watchmaking, so much so he has decided to attend watchmaking school. It's often said, if you choose a job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Jake was nice enough to send me a package filled with Soviet and Russian watches for consideration, as watchmaking from that part of the world is sorely underrepresented in the YouTube community. So that's what inspired me to pull this Poljot out of the drawer and begin to build an appreciation for the value and utility that these watches had provided for many decades. This was just a taste of what Soviet watchmaking has to offer, so I hope you at least learned something from this video today, but if not, I hope you found it enjoyable. Thanks for fixing watches with me today, and I'll see you in the next one.